When you picture an island, your brain probably defaults to paradise, swaying palm trees, turquoise water, and zero worries. But out in the open ocean, there are isolated patches of land where the rules of biology and geology have been completely corrupted. Places where stepping onto the shore doesn't make you a traveler, it makes you prey. Or worse, turns the very air you breathe into a chemical weapon. These are terrifying islands that actually exist, and you are legally forbidden from ever setting foot on them. Number 5. Snake Island. Let's start with a place where you are never more than 3 feet from an agonizing death. If you stood on this rocky shore, you wouldn't be walking on soil, you'd be stepping onto a living, slithering carpet. This is Ilha da Queimada Grande, famously known as Snake Island. It is home to the golden lancehead, a viper found absolutely nowhere else on Earth, and the predator density here is pure nightmare fuel. Experts estimate there are between 1 and 5 highly venomous snakes packed into every single square meter. Because these snakes are trapped on a rock with no ground-dwelling mammals, they had to adapt to hunt migratory birds. To stop a bird from flying away instantly, their venom had to become incredibly fast and ridiculously lethal. It is 3 to 5 times more potent than any mainland snake. If one bites you, the venom doesn't just stop your heart. It contains a specialized cocktail of hemotoxins that literally melts human flesh and muscle on contact, digesting your tissues before you even stop moving. The Brazilian Navy has placed a permanent military blockade around the island. Only authorized researchers are legally allowed to land. Because if you step onto this beach, you aren't an explorer, you're just food. Number 4. Miyake-jima. But if a living carpet of vipers is too loud, imagine a place where the threat is completely silent and invisible. Welcome to Miyake-jima, Japan, the island where life requires a gas mask. This island sits directly on top of an active volcanic chain. In the year 2000, Mount Oyama erupted after a terrifying assault of over 17,000 earthquakes in a single month. The disaster wrapped the island in superheated pyroclastic flows and toxic ash. But the real horror show didn't end when the lava cooled. The ground itself began to leak massive, lethal clouds of sulfur dioxide. Here's the terrifying chemistry of how sulfur dioxide kills. When you inhale it, the gas reacts with the natural moisture inside your respiratory tract. It instantly converts into a corrosive sulfurous acid, literally eating your lungs from the inside out and causing you to suffocate on your own fluids. The island was declared a barren, post-apocalyptic no-go zone for 5 years. Today, some residents have returned, but under one strict, legally binding condition: you must carry a gas mask at all times. If the volcanic warning sirens scream across the island, you have seconds to strap the rubber to your face before the very air you breathe dissolves you. And yet, nature's volatile geology is nothing compared to what happens when humanity weaponizes the soil itself. Number 3. Gruinard Island. If you sail just 1 kilometer off the wild west coast of Scotland, you'd spot a small rocky pasture. It looks completely peaceful, but for nearly half a century, it was a biological sacrifice zone. Welcome to Gruinard Island. During World War II, British military scientists from Portadown were desperate to find a weapon that could defeat the advancing Nazi forces. Winston Churchill himself was reportedly highly enthusiastic about biological weapons. They called it Operation Vegetarian, a plan to drop linseed cake spiked with lethal anthrax spores across the German countryside to starve the nation. To test it, they requisitioned Gruinard Island and brought 80 sheep to the shore. Using a highly virulent strain called Vollum 14578, supplied by an Oxford professor, they detonated anthrax-filled bombs right next to the tethered animals. Within days, the sheep contracted the bacteria and died agonizing deaths. The scientists proved the weapon's terrifying efficiency, but they realized they had made a catastrophic mistake. Anthrax spores are incredibly durable. They seep deep into the soil and can survive dormant for decades. The island was deemed too hazardous and expensive to clean, so the government quarantined it indefinitely, banning all human life. That is until 1981, when a mysterious group calling themselves the Dark Harvest Commandos forced the government's hand. They snuck onto the island, dug up 300 pounds of contaminated soil, and threatened to distribute it if the island wasn't cleaned. To prove they weren't bluffing, they left a sealed package of anthrax-laced soil outside the Portadown research facility, and another at a political conference in Blackpool. Panicking, the government finally authorized decontamination in 1986. They doused the entire island with 280 tons of toxic formaldehyde solution diluted in seawater. The runoff was so corrosive it completely wiped out the local intertidal marine life. In 1990, the island was finally declared safe and returned to private ownership. But the apocalyptic history didn't end there. In March 2022, a massive, unexplained wildfire ripped across the island, burning it from one end to the other in a roaring red inferno. Number 2. Ramri Island. For our next location, we travel to the coast of Myanmar. Imagine being trapped in a dark, muddy swamp where the very trees trap your feet, and the water around you is ruled by a prehistoric giant. This is Ramree Island. In early 1945, during World War II, Allied forces pinned down a garrison of roughly 1,000 Japanese soldiers. Rather than surrendering, the Japanese commander chose to retreat through 10 miles of nearly impassable mangrove swamps to regroup. But they walked straight into a natural crucible of horror. Encircled by British motor launches, the retreating soldiers became trapped in deep mud. Soon, they were afflicted by rampant malaria, swarms of tropical mosquitoes, scorpions, and a terrifying population of saltwater crocodiles. A Canadian naturalist named Bruce Wright, who was commanding a sea reconnaissance unit during the battle, described the night of February 19th as a cacophony of hell. He claimed that in the pitch black, British crews could hear scattered rifle shots punctured by the screams of wounded men being crushed in the jaws of massive reptiles, and the blurred worrying sound of spinning crocodiles. The story was so shocking that the Guinness Book of World Records listed it as the deadliest animal attack in human history, claiming up to 900 soldiers were eaten alive. But does that story hold up to biological reality? Modern historians and herpetologists have heavily challenged this tale. The ecosystem of a mangrove swamp simply cannot support enough giant crocodiles to feed a massive feeding frenzy of that scale. When a herpetologist visited the island in 2000 to interview local survivors, they unanimously discounted the mass crocodile massacre. The real, terrifying truth is much more grounded in the grim realities of war. Out of the 1,000 soldiers who entered the swamp, only about 500 survived to escape. But they didn't die from a reptile feeding frenzy. The vast majority drowned in the deep mud, succumbed to dehydration and malaria, or were targeted by Allied gunfire. Crocodiles did hunt, but experts estimate they only claimed 10 to 15 soldiers who tried to cross a tidal creek. The rest was just the horrific, unyielding toll of human combat, with crocodiles simply scavenging on the aftermath. Number 1. Poveglia Island. Our final destination sits just off the coast of Lido in the beautiful Venetian lagoon. But this island has a history so dark that local fishermen refuse to cast their nets near its shores. This is Poveglia. Beginning in 1793, Venice converted Poveglia into a maritime quarantine station, or lazaretto, to isolate ships, cargo, and people suspected of carrying the deadly bubonic plague. Sensational media accounts and television shows have claimed that over 100,000 plague victims were sent here to die, with their bodies thrown into massive pits and burned. Legend says so much organic matter was incinerated that 50% of the island's soil is composed of human ash. But once again, the scientific data reveals a very different story. Historical researchers have clarified that Poveglia was actually just one of several quarantine islands in the lagoon, and the true death toll from the plague on this specific island was actually closer to 20 people. But the real documented horror of Poveglia happened in the 20th century. In 1922, the existing buildings were converted into a psychiatric facility and long-term care home. Dark rumors quickly circulated about a sadistic head doctor who ran the asylum. He reportedly used his patients as helpless test subjects, performing crude, unnecessary lobotomies using hand drills, chisels, and hammers, entirely without anesthesia. According to legend, the doctor eventually descended into madness, claiming he was being relentlessly hunted by the screaming ghosts of his lobotomized patients. Driven to the edge, he allegedly threw himself off the 12th century bell tower to his death. The hospital officially shut down in 1968, leaving Poveglia completely abandoned. Today, it remains heavily guarded and strictly off-limits to tourists. However, in a fascinating twist, a local citizens association called Poveglia per Tutti fought a massive legal battle to prevent the island from being privatized. In August 2025, they won a 6-year concession to turn the northern part of this dark legendary landmass into a freely accessible public park. The survival question for you: 5 incredible islands. 5 completely different kinds of danger. If you were forced to spend a single week on one of these islands to survive, which one are you choosing? The snake-dense trees of Brazil, the gas-filled streets of Japan, the old testing grounds of Scotland, the muddy swamps of Myanmar, or the ruins of Italy? Let me know your survival strategy in the comments below. If you want to discuss these terrifying locations with other nature and history buffs, or vote on what topic we should cover in our next video, click the link in the description to join our active Discord community. Make sure to hit that subscribe button, and we'll see you in the next deep dive.